Bear, the last shadow in your room isn't yours. Don't turn around. Part 1. The First Shadow. You know that feeling, when you're alone in your room and the air suddenly goes still? When the hairs on the back of your neck prickle, and you swear you just saw something move in the corner of your eye? That's how it started for me. I never believed in the supernatural. Ghosts, demons, shadow people, all just stories to scare kids at sleepovers. But then, it began. The first time I noticed something was wrong, I was lying in bed, scrolling through my phone. The room was dark, except for the dim glow of the screen. Then, out of nowhere, I felt it. A presence. Heavy. Watching. I froze. My fingers hovered over the screen as my breath hitched. There was no sound, no movement, but I knew something was there. Slowly, I lowered my phone and glanced around. The shadows in my room stretched long and jagged, but nothing seemed out of place. Then I saw it. My own shadow was cast against the wall from the phone's light, but there was another one, taller, thinner, standing just behind me. I didn't turn around. Something primal in my brain screamed at me, "Don't look, don't move, don't let it know you see it." The shadow didn't move, it just waited. I held my breath until my lungs burned. Then, inch by inch, I lifted my phone again, pretending to go back to scrolling. The second I did, the other shadow shifted. Not much, just a slight tilt of the head, as if studying me. I didn't sleep that night. Serpan, Part 2, Whispers in the Dark. The next few nights were worse. I started noticing small things I could almost dismiss as paranoia. The temperature in my room would drop suddenly. My door, which I always kept closed, would creak open just a crack when I was sure I'd locked it. And then, there were the whispers. At first, they were faint, like distant radio static, just beyond comprehension. But as the nights passed, they grew clearer. "Don't turn around." A voice, raspy and slow, like dry leaves scraping against glass. It didn't come from any direction. It was just there, inside my head. I tried to rationalize it. Stress, lack of sleep, maybe even carbon monoxide poisoning. But deep down, I knew. Something was in my room with me, and it wasn't leaving. One night, I made the mistake of looking into my mirror before bed. My reflection stared back, exhausted, dark circles under my eyes. But then, my reflection smiled. I didn't. I stumbled back, heart hammering. When I looked again, the last shadow in your room isn't yours. Don't turn around. Introduction. You know that feeling, when you're alone in your room and the air suddenly goes still? When the hairs on the back of your neck prickle and you know something is watching you? You tell yourself it's just your imagination. Shadows don't move on their own. Flections don't blink when you don't. But what if the last shadow in your room isn't yours? This happened to a girl named Lila. She thought she was safe in her own home. She thought the figure standing behind her in the dim light was just a trick of her tired eyes. But then, it moved, and by then, it was already too late. Body. Lila lived alone in a small apartment on the third floor of an old building. The kind with creaky floors, flickering lights, and thin walls that carried whispers from the neighbors. She never minded the solitude, until the night she noticed the shadow. It started subtly. She'd catch a dark shape in the corner of her vision, just beyond the mirror's edge. She'd turn, and nothing would be there. Just the empty room, the faint hum of the refrigerator, and the quiet dread pooling in her stomach. Then came the whispers. At first, she thought it was the wind sneaking through the cracks of her aging window. But the voice was too clear, too elaborate, a rasping murmur just behind her ear. "Don't turn around." Her blood turned to ice. Lila froze, her breath shallow. She could feel it, the presence looming behind her, close enough that if she turned, she'd come face to face with something. The shadow stretched long across the floor, jagged and wrong, its edges twitching like static. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "I like watching you sleep." Her reflection in the dark screen of her phone wasn't alone. There, just over her shoulder, was a face, pale, hollow-eyed, lips curled into a smile too wide for a human mouth. She screamed. Lila spun around, but the room was empty. The shadow was gone. The whispers stopped. For a moment she convinced herself it was just stress, lack of sleep, anything but the truth, that something had been in her apartment, watching, waiting. But the next night, it got worse. She woke to the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling her bed. The air smelled like damp earth and something metallic. Blood. Her heart immered as she squeezed her eyes shut, praying it was a nightmare. Then, a cold breath brushed her neck. "You should have listened." Lila's eyes flew open. The shadow was there, standing at the foot of her bed, its form shifting like smoke. It leaned closer, its elongated fingers curling around the bed frame. She ran. Barefoot and trembling, she fled into the hallway, but the lights flickered and the shadow was everywhere, stretching from the walls, the ceiling, oozing from the cracks in the door. The whispers grew louder, verlapping, chanting, "Don't turn around, don't turn around, don't turn." She made the mistake of looking back. Conclusion. The police found Lila's apartment empty. No signs of a break-in. The last shadow in your room isn't yours. Don't turn around. Introduction. You've felt it before, that creeping sensation of being watched when you're alone. The way the hair on your neck stands on end, the chill that slithers down your spine. You tell yourself it's nothing, just your imagination. But what if it isn't? Imagine this. It's late. The house is silent. You're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone, when you notice something off. The shadows on your wall don't quite match the shape of your body. There's an extra darkness, a stillness that doesn't belong. You freeze, because deep down you know the last shadow in your room isn't yours, and whatever is standing behind you doesn't want you to turn around. This is the story of Sarah Carter, a woman who learned that horrifying truth too late. Body. Sarah had always been a skeptic. Ghost stories, urban legends, even the eerie whispers of late-night horror podcasts. She dismissed them all with an eye roll and a laugh. That was before it started, before the shadows began moving on their own. It began subtly, a flicker of movement in the corner of her eye, the faint sound of breathing when she was home alone. At first, she blamed exhaustion. Her job was demanding, her sleep schedule erratic. But then, one night, she saw it. She had just climbed into bed, the dim glow of her phone casting long, distorted shapes across the walls. As she shifted, she noticed something impossible. Her shadow didn't move with her. It stayed perfectly still, arms slightly outstretched, as if frozen mid-motion. And then, it tilted its head. Sarah's breath hitched, her pulse roared in her ears. She wanted to scream, to run, but her body refused to obey. The shadow wasn't hers, and worse, it wasn't alone. Behind her, just beyond the edge of her vision, she felt a presence, something standing inches away, its breath slow and deliberate, waiting. "Don't turn around." The thought slammed into her like a command. Some primal instinct screamed that if she looked, if she acknowledged it, something terrible would happen. She squeezed her eyes shut, heart hammering. When she dared to look again, the shadows were normal, but the air was heavier, thick with the scent of damp earth and something metallic. The next few nights were a waking nightmare. The shadows grew bolder. They stretched when they shouldn't. They lingered in doorways, their edges too sharp, too real. And always, she felt it behind her, closer each time. Then came the whispers. At first, they were just murmurs, barely audible beneath the hum of the ceiling fan. But soon, they became words. Sarah. Her name, spoken in a voice that wasn't human, a voice that slithered from the dark, guttural and wet, like something struggling to form words with a mouth not meant for speech. She stopped sleeping, stopped turning off the lights, but the darkness always found a way in. One evening, she caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror, and behind her, just for a fraction of a second, stood a figure. Tall, emaciated, its limbs too long, its face a void of swirling black. Then it was gone. Sarah knew then. It wasn't just watching. It was learning, mimicking, preparing. The final night she made a mistake. Exhausted beyond reason, she collapsed onto her bed, forgetting just for a moment the unspoken rule. She turned around, and it was there. Not a shadow, not a trick of the light, a thing of stretched skin and hollow eyes, its grin splitting wide, too wide, revealing rows of needle-thin teeth. The last thing Sarah heard was its whisper, wet and eager. "You looked." Conclusion. The police found Sarah's apartment empty, no signs of struggle, no forced entry. The last shadow in your room isn't yours, don't turn around. Opening scene, a dimly lit bedroom. The camera slowly pans across the room, focusing on the silhouette of a person sitting on the edge of their bed. The only light comes from a flickering lamp, casting long, wavering shadows on the walls. You've always been told that shadows are just tricks of the light, harmless, fleeting imprints of the world around you. But what if I told you that sometimes shadows don't belong to anything real, that sometimes the last shadow in your room isn't yours? This happened to a woman named Clara. She lived alone in a small apartment, the kind where every creak of the floorboards echoed like a whisper in the dark. Clara never believed in the supernatural. She laughed at ghost stories, rolled her eyes at urban legends. But that changed one night, when she noticed something wrong. It started with the shadows. Clara would come home late from work, exhausted, and collapse onto her bed. She'd turn off the lights, close her eyes, and just as she was about to drift off, she'd see it, a shadow, darker than the rest, standing in the corner of her room. At first she dismissed it, a trick of the light, a figment of her tired mind. But night after night, it was there, watching, waiting, and then it started moving. One evening, Clara sat at her desk, scrolling through her laptop. The lamp behind her cast her own shadow onto the wall. But when she shifted, her shadow didn't. It stayed still, frozen, and then slowly it turned its head toward her. Clara's breath caught in her throat. She spun around, heart pounding, but there was nothing there, just the empty room. She told herself she was imagining things, but deep down, she knew. Something was in her apartment, something that didn't belong. Days passed and the shadow grew bolder. It would flicker at the edge of her vision, darting just out of sight whenever she turned. She'd catch glimpses of it in mirrors, a tall, gaunt figure standing behind her, its hollow eyes locked onto hers. But when she whirled around, it vanished. Then came the whispers, faint, breathy murmurs in the dead of night, words she couldn't quite make out, spoken in a voice that wasn't human. Clara stopped sleeping. She barricaded her door, slept with the lights on. But it didn't matter. The shadow was always there, waiting. One night she woke to the sound of scratching, slow, deliberate claws dragging down her bedroom wall. She lay paralyzed, her pulse roaring in her ears. And then she felt it, a cold breath on the back of her neck. A voice, so close it brushed against her skin, whispered, "Don't turn around." Clara didn't listen. She turned. What she saw wasn't human. A face stretched too wide, eyes blacker than the void, a mouth split into a grin of jagged teeth. It lunged. The next morning, Clara's apartment was empty. No sign of a struggle, no trace of her. The only thing left behind was a single sentence, scrawled in shaky handwriting on her bedroom wall. "The last shadow in your room isn't yours." So tonight, before you go to sleep, take a look around. Count the shadows. Make sure they all belong to something real,